And very, very interesting topic. And since each one of us are pursuing our own career in different ways, but we thought we should have somebody who has gone through, like I've written in the chat box there, very illustrious career. I would say nothing less than dream career. And I've seen him in some way. And I must tell you, all of you, that it's a pleasure knowing him personally. And before I hand over the platform to him to share his insights on this wonderful topic, is it going to be later or lattice work, right? And there is so much depth of information and also the career related insights there. And before that, like I said, let me have the pleasure of introducing him formally. Like I said, he has a dream career. I mean, very rarely people are blessed with that, but he's one such. And that goes without saying the kind of planning that he must have had while he was student days itself. After his MBA from ICFA Business School, Hyderabad, he joined ICICI Bank. Literally, that's the time ICICI Bank was coming up, right? I mean, just, literally grew with the bank itself. So he joined the ICICI Bank in 2004 as assistant manager, and he went on to become a manager for credit risk and portfolio management, where he worked for, totally for 2 years and 9 months. After that, he joined another illustrious bank, Barclays Bank. He joined as a senior manager in March 2007, and by March 2009, he has become vice president, head of debt recovery and strategy. You can imagine the kind of work that he must have put in to ensure the kind of career pool that he had. After that, right, he worked with another great illustrious consulting company called Bain and Company. But he started actually as a summer associate while where he joined the program at London Business School for his master business administration there, right? And I'm sure he has a lot of stories. I know some of them, not all of them, but I'm sure he is the best person to share some of the very interesting that has happened while he was at London Business School. And after his stint at London Business School, he joined Bain and Company full time. He joined as a consultant, and then he became case team leader, where he worked for 2 years, 5 months. After that, he joined. He has been with this great company called Mastercard. Right now, he has put in almost about 8 years and 1 month. Right, he joined as director, senior managing consultant. Then currently, he's SVP pricing and investment strategy, and also data and services, working for New York as well as Dubai. And like I said, it's nothing less than the dream career, right? I'm sure each one of us will have great insights about. Now, not to mean that we have to regret what has happened. There's nothing that you and I can do about it. But I think going forward, I think whatever little things that we can learn, I'm sure you will have great insights from this wonderful gentleman. And let's all welcome. And he's joining us from New York early in the morning, almost about, I think, if I'm right, about 8:30 there. And that on Saturday, right? Thank you so much, Ankeet, and absolute pleasure having you. And I'm sure all of our participants are looking forward to hearing from you on this wonderful topic. I would say very thoughtful topic, career. Is it later or is it latest work? Over to you, Ankeet.
Thank you, Dr. Chaudhary, for that introduction. I have to say that your mentorship over the years has meant a lot to me. So thank you for that. And none of this would have been possible without you having sown the seeds in the beginning in terms of how I think and go about things. Good evening, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. I'm dialing in as Dr. Chaudhary said, from New York, where I stay with my wife and with my son. It's a very beautiful morning here, and it's an exciting day ahead of us. And I'm here to speak about careers, right? And thinking about how career, is it really thinking about it as a ladder or is it lattice work? And I'll share some insights there. I'm not definitely going to start by defining what a ladder is and what a lattice work is, and we'll come to that, and I'll definitely share some of my insights there. What I want to do is I want to start a bit by explaining into a little more depth about my career journey, right? And Dr. Chaudhary has done a good job to lay out what it looks like. But what I want to do is spend some time talking to you about what my mindset was, how did I make the decisions that I made, what was that insight behind it, right? And then we can come and talk about how, at what points of time in my career I was thinking of it more as a ladder, why, and sometimes as a lattice work, and how has that evolved over time, and what is my thinking currently. I'll also try and leave you with some of the 2 or 3 key learnings from my career that have really helped me. So as I talk about my story, I would say that do focus and try and think of yourself as, was my mindset more about thinking of it as a ladder? Was it about lattice work and how it has evolved? And you will see my thinking has really evolved over the last several years, and where I am today. So I started my career in obviously 2004 with ICICI Bank just after my MBA. I was a young analyst. I was doing a lot of data analytics work, some credit risk work. My mindset then, as somebody who's fresh graduate, was really, okay, how can I grow? So how can I get promoted? And at that point of time, I remember my ambition was not necessarily growth for the sake of the title, but growth because I was looking for more money. Because you're kind of young, you want to go out, you want to spend more money. So really, money was very, very important to me at that point of time. And there's nothing wrong with it, by the way. And at different points of time in your life, you will have different priorities. So that was my mindset then. And because money was so important to me at that point of time, that's the reason why when I got an opportunity to work with Barclays Bank in Dubai, I left, because I knew that if you work internationally, you might earn more, and so on and so forth. So that's why I left Mumbai and went to Dubai in 2007. In Barclays Bank, I started off again in the credit risk team. Those were the 3 or 4 years that I worked there were the most challenging part of my life, of my career, I think, as I look back. Because imagine being in the credit risk team of a bank, right, where you are managing credit risk. And imagine this was the year 2008, 2009, when the whole global financial crisis was happening. So a lot of our customers stopped paying and they moved into delinquency. And so I was working basically 7-day weeks, very long hours, and I was enjoying it. Right, I have no complaints. It was amazing. It was an amazing journey there. And as I got to the 3-4 year mark, I started to feel, okay, I'm getting a bit bored with this. What should I be doing next? But so my firm then, the company I was working with, was not one which was encouraging too much of lateral move to say, okay, now you've done it for 2 years, 3 years, let's why don't you do something else? They were not encouraging of that. And so I realized that it is maybe time to do something else. And I wanted to do another course, where I left and studied in London. And then as I was reflecting, I mean, the whole pause of giving your career a bit of a break and really going and studying again, it gave me an opportunity to rethink my whole career and my priorities, right? And I started to reflect upon what is important to me. Of course, prior to that, money was very important till that point. I also started to realize that I get bored very quickly with things. As in, if you put me into a new role, I can do it maybe for 2 years max, and then I start to get a bit bored. I feel like, oh, this is becoming a bit repetitive. I want to do something else, and I start losing a bit of my motivation. So that was realization number one. Now, when I took a break from work and I was studying. Realization number two was, as I looked back on my career, I realized I have great expertise that I developed in analytics and credit risk management on the financial institution side. What I was missing a bit was breadth of experience. Right, I did not have marketing experience. I did not have sales experience. I did not have a bunch of other experiences. So I realized that the next role out of my studies in London has to be in a firm that affords me these two. Right, you always try and see, okay, what is it that motivates you, and you think about what role you want to go. And that is why I said, okay, I want a role where I can cut wider, as well as I want a role where I can do multiple things very quickly. And so the good fit was consulting role. And so I joined this company called Bain & Company. I came back to Dubai and I joined them. And it was a very interesting world then, because I had 7 years of work experience. I had just studied again and come back. And I had joined after my summer internship with them. I joined as what is called as consultant level. And suddenly, from being the youngest VP at Barclays, where all other VPs around me were older than me, I became the oldest consultant at Bain, which is, if I looked around, everybody was minimum 3 to 5 years younger than me. So it was very, very different mindset for me to bring. And I could see that even these 3 to 5 years of difference makes such a big difference in your mindset and the way you go about things, the amount of energy you have. But it was phenomenal. I think the 3 years at Bain, I learned so much. We had really long nights as a consultant. You're in, especially in management consulting, you're working really hard, but then you were also solving very complex problems. So we were working directly with very senior execs at different firms, doing cutting edge work. So it was very, very exciting. And I could have continued there because it was really up my alley. I was doing multiple projects. You do a project for 3 months to 6 months, then you go into another project, so a very different piece of work. Then you go into another piece of work, which is very different. So it was really up my alley. I was not getting bored. I was really enjoying the thrill of this complex problem solving, working with very, very, very senior people at the client side. However, what at that point of time, when I was beginning to hit the 3-year mark, I was also going to have my baby, right? And my job then at Bain meant that I needed to be traveling 4 days a week. 4 days a week, you were on the road. Left every Monday morning, came back home on Thursday night, Friday, you work from home. So that was essentially the life. And I said that, look, while this job is thrilling and I was doing really well at the job as well, I realized that I need to start prioritizing a bit my family then, right? So I said, okay, even though this job is thrilling, it is very exciting, no doubt, but let me take a bit of a step back and think and spend some more time with the family. And so then I started to look at other roles outside of Bain. And then again, there was, especially once you've done consulting, I think management consulting, you become very structured in the way you go about things. So when I was leaving Bain, I was thinking, okay, what is it that I'm looking for in my next firm? I asked myself that question, and I put down the bullets that I was looking for. And I said, okay, first thing I'm looking for is a company which is international. So I was looking for more an MNC, not necessarily a local company based out of Dubai. I was looking at MNC, that was one. Second, the company needed to be in a space which is growing very fast, right? That was my second criteria. My third criteria was the company culture was very important to me. So it needs to be a company which treats its employees fairly, has great culture. And the fourth thing I was looking for was the company should be such as it gives me more international mobility and more career mobility, right? And then the trick becomes, how do you identify these companies? I think the first two criteria are easier, right? International, you know which companies are MNCs. To think about whether it's in the right space, you can understand which companies are in the right space or not. And then the other two becomes trickier. How do you know what is the culture of the company like? How do you know whether you get good career mobility or not? And I was lucky to have, because I was in the Dubai market for a long time, I had friends in multiple companies. And so either you speak to your friends who are in different companies, or you speak to their friends who are in the same company. And that's how I started to evaluate companies. And there was a short list of companies that I had, and I applied, and I had 3 offers, including from Mastercard. So then you decide, okay, how do I decide between these 3 companies, right? So the companies were Visa, Mastercard, and HSBC. And I really went with my gut because I realized that my interview experience and the people I met in my interviews in Mastercard were people I could really see myself working. So I realized, okay, that could be the best company for me. Now, as I joined Mastercard, there was another realization I had, which is that while I've come so far, and my first part, as I was describing, first part of my career, my focus was really, okay, how can I make more money? So that was the focus. But as I got into Mastercard, I realized that all of my peers were at much more senior levels than me in other firms. And the reason they were at more senior levels is because I had taken this step back, in the sense I was a VP at Barclays, and I became a consultant at Bain. So then I realized that because of that step back, while it's really, by the way, it really accelerated my career. I know if you were growing at at a 25-degree angle before my London studies in Bain, I started to go at maybe a 60-degree angle. My career trajectory really took off, but I was still lower compared to my peers. And so my real focus, interestingly, for the next 4 or 5 years at Mastercard was, okay, how can I get more promotions? How can I get to a more senior level? Interestingly, that was my focus, and that is why what I spent my energy on. And I got 3 promotions within 6 years, right? So I really was able to ramp up. And as I started to hit that mark now, as in the beginning of last year, when I became SVP. So SVP typically is about 2% of the organization. So you're in the top 2%. And then you start to think about, now what next? Right. I also had a very interesting conversation with a very old boss of mine from ICICI, who's now CEO of a financial firm in India. And he was then just very, very senior at ICICI. This was a couple of years ago. And he was telling me, look, Ankit, I mean, because I've been focusing so much on my vertical growth today, I feel like, what do I do next? I almost hope that I continue to be at the same level for many years, because I have nowhere else to go. How do you go further high? That also mixed with my own thought process, I realized that at this point of time in my career, vertical growth is not very important to me at all. Neither is money so much. It's really about how can I do very interesting things, right? So anything that I'm thinking about now is really, okay, what are the interesting things I want to do? And that's really my mindset. In fact, now that I've been in my role for about a year and a half, and I told you about how I tend to get bored, I'm beginning to slightly think about, okay, things are getting a bit repetitive, and how do I think about my next role? And the thought process, that I'm applying is that, okay, I want to do something interesting. And I look back at my career and I say, is my career fully rounded? Have I done everything that is there to be done? So I have done product management, I've done consulting, I've done analytics, I've done a bunch of roles. But the couple of roles that I've not done are, I've not done sales. I mean, I've done some bit of consultative selling, but I've not really done sales in the typical sense of the word. So that's something I want to do, because I want to round out my career. So, the way I'm thinking about is, how do I round out a career? So I've not done sales, so I want to do sales. And, as you go more and more senior and you get older, people don't even trust you with a new role. So I have to do some convincing there. And I'll tell you what my strategy is. And I've not done any kind of marketing work, right? So I want to start with sales. So I'm thinking my next role should be sales, for example. And then you might think, okay, you are at this level, and how will anybody trust you with doing sales, because you've never done it? And the trick there is, beginning January, what I'm going to do is, I am going to ask our sales lead for Mastercard to say, hey, can I start taking care of 1 or 2 accounts? Can I start managing those 2 accounts on the side beyond my day job? Because by doing that for about 6 to 9 months, I will be at a position by mid next year to show that, look, I have managed these and I've delivered an exceptional outcome. So I am prepared, and you can see that my talents or my capabilities, my effort are very portable from one place to the other. So that's what I intend to do. Now, is sales my dream role? Is that something I was born to do? No, I don't know. I enjoy the process of work, and I intend to try sales. But is it my dream job? I don't know. But my strategy right now is, how can I do interesting things, what I've not done before? Life is short, careers are short. How can I do more interesting things? How can I do things which round out my career, which I've never tried before? So that's really my mindset at this stage. So that is how you see how I've kind of evolved my thought process over time, how I've taken some risks, taken a couple of step backs to accelerate growth, and so on. So that's what this whole journey was about. So with that, let's talk about ladders and lattices, right? What do they really mean? Now, think of a ladder. You know what the ladder is, and a lot of times careers are thought of as ladders, but I want to encourage a lot of you to now start thinking of it as a lattice. In fact, last night, as I was preparing for this discussion, I did a Google to say career ladder. You get about 8.2 million hits on Google search. And when I said career lattice, you get about 250,000 hits, right? So not a lot of people are thinking about this. It is not necessarily a physical construct. It's not about saying that, okay, Latticework is like a lot of crosses. So how can I think of it like this? It's not about the physical construct. It's not even a construct in organizations. Today, organizations are not necessarily built like lattices, right? It is really about the perspective. It is really about what is between your ears. How are you thinking about your career? right? And I'll have some tips in the end, a couple of tips of what you could do to think of this much more, right? So what is a ladder? A ladder is this traditional hierarchical organization where it has a traditional career advancement model. You do one role, then you do it for a few years, then you progress vertically to the same role and do a bigger role, and then you go up and so on and so forth, right? That's a traditional ladder. It has some positives because you develop quite a bit of expertise in what you do. You get promoted after you have a lot more predictability. You get promoted after ever so often after a few years, and that keeps you motivated. And it has a very well-defined trajectory. Okay, you keep going vertically up, and you become almost senior. It has some downsides as well. It is very rigid, so you cannot. If you just think of your career as a ladder, it's very rigid. Okay, I have to do this role. After manager, I have to become senior manager. After this, I have to become this, and so on. It's very rigid, and sometimes it might frustrate you because the fact of life is just putting in the hard work. You think, okay, I've put on the hard work and I should get promoted. It's not true in organizations. Organizations are messy, right? It's not, they are not very scientific, right? So if you think of your career just as a ladder to say, okay, I go from one to the other, it might frustrate you. And then the third downside of a ladder is you don't get the breadth of exposure. You might, if you just think of your career as a ladder, you go up the chain vertically up, but then you don't build any expertise, anything left and right, and so you might get derailed. I do have friends, by the way, who've grown very fast vertically in a single organization and multiple organizations with same line, and now they have great expertise, but they're thinking, what next? I have to work for 20 more years. I mean, folks at my stage have to work minimum 20 more years now. We have 20 more years left in a career. If you've already done you've grown vertically in a career ladder, what do you do now, right? If anything, and if you do some reading on this topic, you'll realize that. So one of my business school professors called Linda Grattan, she also wrote this book called The 100-Year Life. Your lifespans are growing, which means your career spans are also growing, right? So if your career spans are growing, imagine if you just think of your life as your career as a ladder. You go up a certain stage, maybe you become CEO, and then what? Right? So you have to think about how do I do interesting things. Which brings me back to the question on lattices, right? What are lattices? Lattices are a newer way of thinking. It's not the traditional way. It's a more flexible model where you don't necessarily always grow vertically. You also grow horizontally, you go diagonally, you do different roles. You take on very different roles over the span of your career, and which helps you build many different skills and keeps you interested, right? It has a lot of positives, I think. One, it helps you build this adaptability mindset where you know that you'll not worry about taking on new roles because you know that you've done this in the past, you've done multiple things in the past. I think it keeps you more engaged and motivated. Imagine the thrill of taking on a new role, right? And delivering against that role, learning the ropes there. It keeps you very engaged. It keeps you very motivated. It helps you broaden your skill set, so it makes you more attractive as a professional. And I'll come to a very good example of some research that's happened on this as well. There are some downsides, by the way. Lattices are not always positive. So one is there's a lot of ambiguity in lattices because you don't know what your next career move is. I mean, I don't know today what my next career move is because I'm not necessarily just looking for the next. I'm not going to think, okay, now I'm SVP and next level is EVP. No, not necessarily. There's ambiguity, so it might lead to some frustration because you might become like me from the youngest VP to the oldest consultant. So it's not for everybody, by the way. That mindset that, okay, I'm fine with this and I'm comfortable with this is a bit difficult to digest. It's ambiguous and you might feel frustrated. And then you might not build any specialization. You might not be able to build any specific specialization in a domain. I mean, if I think of my career, I have not built a specialization in any topic. However, I've built specialization more around management topics and strategy and so on, right? So that's what I've built. But what I do bring to the table, if I have to sell my career to somebody, is I have done multiple roles and succeeded in them. And so you put me anywhere where there is a problem to be solved, no matter how messy it is, I can go and solve it because I have that confidence. I've done this multiple times, right? So that's the way you think of ladders and lattices. Now, I'm not here to say that do one versus the other, right? That's absolutely not what I'm here to say, right? I'm also not here to say one is definitely better than the other. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that while you think of your career as a ladder traditionally, always always know that there is this other way to think about your career, which makes it very rich, makes it very interesting for you. It helps you navigate, a longer career even better. It keeps you motivated and really builds you multiple skill sets. And at different points of time in your life, you will want to think of your career as a ladder, like I did in the first few years at Mastercard. I was only thinking, okay, how can I just go up next level and next level and next level? But there were times when I did not think of it. Like when I was moving from Barclays out into Bain, I did not think of it as, okay, what is my next level? I left Barclays as VP. Next role has to be either VP or SVP. No, I was not thinking of it that way. I was thinking, what is the more interesting thing that I need to do? So at different times of your career, you will apply different things. Which brings me to the key takeaways. And this is what I want to close with a couple of more stories, right? So what are the takeaways? First is just take initiative and don't think of doing difficult things, right? Now there was a study by Harvard Business Review. It is called the CEO Genome Project, right? It ran over 10 years. And what in that project, what they did was they did research on about 17,000 C-suite executives, of which about 2,500 were CEOs. And the key question that they were trying to answer was, what if I look at these 2,500 CEOs, what have they done in their careers that have made them CEOs? What are the kind of common things we can identify? And they identified three things, right? The first thing they said was 60% of those CEOs, of the 2,500 CEOs, had at some point or the other in their career taken a smaller role than what they were doing, right? So they were not scared of saying, okay, I'm such and such a senior person and now doing the smaller role. They never thought of that as a downside. They had taken a smaller role, right? And that has kind of accelerated their careers. And I can really say I'm no CEO, and I don't even, by the way, have any ambition to be CEO. But the whole taking a step back for me to rethink of my career and be willing to take that step down has really accelerated my career. My career would not have accelerated without that. So that was one thing that they did. Second thing, the 33%, so 1 in 3 of the CEOs have taken on roles even when they were young or more junior, even if they thought we are not ready for this role. Oh, I'm not ready for this role. It's a very big role. I'm not ready for it. They still went ahead and took it, right? And another 1 in 3, they have taken on what you can define as a big mess, right? So these are roles or units or a job which are very messy. Like it's a problem. Nobody wants to touch it. Oh, nobody wants to work there. It's a very messy department. Or there's a lot of problems there. I don't want to work there. But they have gone and done those roles, right? And that kind of gears you up and makes you ready for the future. So that was that HBR genome project. Ran over 10 years. I think it's a very definitive study, and you should definitely go and read about it. The second advice I always give is lean into your fear, right? And very interestingly, I learned this lean into your fear when I was doing improv, right? So, a lot of times in my career, especially as I was hitting 7, 8, 10 years experience in my career, I was getting this feedback that, Ankeet, as you're getting more senior, you need to have what is called as executive presence. And I never understood what executive presence is. And everybody tried to define it to me in different ways. But net, I realized that I need to become much more vocal, much more confident when I speak in different settings. Especially when I'm speaking to very, very senior folks in the organization, I need to become much more confident. I should be able to engage them and so on. And so I spoke to a mentor of mine who said that you need to put yourself in a very difficult situation, which you typically not put yourself in, and that would help you. And then somebody else told me, why don't you do improv? Now, improv, I don't know if everybody understands what improv is. Is a type of entertainment where you go on stage, you're given any kind of topic or a situation, and you need to start enacting it in whatever shape or form. I did not see myself as an improv guy, right? It was it was a big fear for me to get on stage in front of strangers. If I have a prepared speech, no problem. But if it is improv, where I'm given a weird situation and I have to talk about it or enact it and act in front of them, it is not me. I did not see myself as that. But I said, okay, let me go and do it. Let me go and do it, right? Because it makes life more interesting, it gives me a new challenge. And I did it. I did it for several months when I was in Dubai. And that changed absolutely 180 degrees my persona. Everybody noticed, not just my colleagues. My friends started to notice that I've changed, my persona has changed. My relatives, my mom, my brother, my sister, everybody started to see something's different about you. And I realized what was different about me. I had started to become much more confident and vocal in what and how I operated. So one of the things they teach you in improv is always, whenever you see danger, you go towards it. You don't run away from it, right? And that mindset for me has been so helpful in every situation, be it day to day, when there is a project which I feel, oh, this is a very tricky project, and I try and avoid it. I always remind myself, this is something you're avoiding, go towards it, not away from it. It really helps you. So in similar way in your career, always whenever you see something which you're just scared of, or you think, I will I be able to do this or not, etc., go towards it rather than away from it. It really, 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 really helps you. It keeps things very interesting, challenges you in different ways. The final point is really, if you are running organizations, or you are in a situation where you are able to influence organizations, I would say that you need to create now more formally these frameworks which helps people think of their careers more as a lattice and less as a ladder. So I'm very fortunate to be in Mastercard, where the norm really is that you should be changing your roles every 2 to 3 years. That's the expectation. If you do not change and you get stuck in a role for 6 to 10 years, then after that it's very difficult for you to find anything within the organization. So, and in Mastercard there's a track called Unlocked. It's like a platform where you can go put in your profile, and you can also search for other roles within the firm. Now, these are not necessarily roles where you go and apply for that role and you get that role. It's really a role where somebody is looking for somebody to support maybe 5 hours a week or 8 hours a week over the next 2 months. So I can, for example, go into that platform and see somebody's advertised a role there, which is where I need to support 4 hours a week for the next 2 months. It could be a role within my department, could be a role in some other department, very different role. I can apply for it and I can get it. And if I get it, I don't necessarily even need to talk to my line manager to do that role, but I go and put some effort and I learn something new, and I make myself attractive to that person as well if I'm looking for a new role. So that is a very formalized process within Mastercard, where you are able to do these projects outside of your immediate line. And I think a lot of companies should do this more formally, so that you get these projects to do outside of your immediate department. You get to learn a lot more, which opens your perspective. It helps you think about your next career move, helps you experiment with things before you take them on, and so on. And the history behind this Unlocked is also is very interesting. And this is the last thing I speak about. Is, we did not have this formal way of allowing people to do project work in other departments. But it was during COVID when our then CEO Ajay Banga, he sent this mail out to the entire organization to say, we want to support governments with whatever help we can, and we know there's so much expertise within the firm. So if governments are today struggling to get the right medicines at the right place, they're struggling with analytics and managing this whole COVID scenario. So what skills do you have, and how do you want to help the governments? Mail me, right? I think he got some 20,000 emails or something over the next 2 or 3 days. And then he realized there's so much pent-up demand in this firm of people wanting to do something else as a project, that it was his brainchild to create this Unlocked platform. And it's very, very successful. And sometimes even I advertise projects there. And if I want people to work on something, I don't have enough capacity in my team, I can go and advertise a project, and somebody from completely different team can go and help me with that project. And by that way, that person is getting exposure to me, and my unit and what we do. And on the other hand, I'm able to evaluate somebody else for future roles. So it's a win-win for the whole firm, and that's what we're doing. So that's how in Mastercard, where I work now, we're kind of creating this formal framework where people are thinking about their careers and in a more lattice work way than a ladder way. Right. So that's all I have to say. I'm very open to questions.
Right, thank you, Ankit. I think it's quite, very candid and also quite interesting, I would say. But again, I think, like you rightly said, that disclaimer is definitely not that everybody should follow or can follow, because each person has his own trajectory and his own DNA kind of thing. But having said that, I think we have quite a few questions. But let me start with the first one, Ankit. I think somebody has written there that you know uh, you know. uh, some companies in India, but of course, maybe the rest of the world, they encourage something called as job rotation. But trust me, there are a lot of people, especially youngsters, right? The people who are just beginning their career. What they've noticed, in fact, through research also, is that somebody just recently minted a business school graduate, and then let's say after 2 years also he's asked to work on something else, right? Not in the same department, but in maybe in different department. Now, what we found is almost about 42% of the people are showing resistance kind of thing. Now, it is actually one way of looking at it. Is it's like you rightly said, lattice work is you are moving, we are moved, diagonally or and up, vertically or whatever it is. But the point is that it might definitely give you that option to explore that new area of work or new line of work. But then when you get to see that nearly about 42% of the people are showing the resistance, because somewhere I think the ingraining has been that the modality kind of thing, right, where you need to be good in something, but then you also need to be expertise. And if you don't build that expertise, maybe I'm not going to be there for long time kind of thing, because you'll find too many generalists, but then not specialists kind of thing. So therefore, how do you overcome that fear of what do you say? Committing yourself, Ankit, because I think that's what I think most of the people might get fear in that sense that will I be losing out on my core work, or will I be losing out on my expertise and things like that, or will I be able to fail to build on my expertise? So there's that fear of committing oneself to exploring the other side of the story.
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's two pieces of advice I generally give to youngsters, because I mentor so many people within this firm and outside. And for youngsters, there's two pieces of advice I give. One is I'd say, and there's no benchmark, but I say maybe for the first 10 years of your career, always ensure you're jumping around as much as you can.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that, by the way, and it's a bit controversial what I say, because I tell them, and a lot of people come and ask for, everybody's thinking, what should I be doing? And I tell them, look, my advice to you is for the first 10 years of your career, try and do multiple roles, but also, if possible, do 2 to 3 companies, jump between companies. It's a bit controversial thing to say, because everybody wants more job loyalty, people should stay. And I realized that a lot of companies sell you this dream that, oh, you will not get any as good an exposure as we give you. You cannot get a role as good as we. And I have been the victim of that when I was told early on in my career that you cannot get better exposure than this company because nobody trusts youngsters so much. Right. But what I realized, but when you jump companies, you realize you learn a new approach, new culture. Now, the problem is if you get stuck in the same culture for 10 years, you've not learned any new culture, any new ways to solve problems, and you just get stuck there. That's one thing. The second thing I tell them is, let's say somebody is doing analytics work, right? And they're very good at analytics and data crunching and building models and so on. And they do it for 3 to 4 years. And I tell them, look, you should not get scared now to go and do sales, because guess what? You can always come back and do analytics. You've proved yourself there. If you do not succeed in sales, people will always trust you with analytics. You're a proven quantity. The fear is, I think, not that change or not building specialization. The fear I feel is that if I do not succeed in this role and I want to do this role again, I will have lost 3 years of my career, because I would again start at a slightly maybe lower level to come back to this. That is the real fear. If you really ask them why, They will say the fear is, oh, I can do analytics, I've proven, but I will start at a lower level. However, the fact is you might start at a lower level, but your career trajectory will be much steeper.
Absolutely.
Right? In my case, when I was leaving Barclays, leaving banking and getting into consulting, which is very generalist, I did have some fear to say, okay, I had a very proven track record. All my friends were advising me that why you have credit risk is a sought after skill, analytics is a sought after skill. Why do you want to go to consulting? I realized that yes, I started lower at a lower level in consulting, but my acceleration from there was very different because the perspective I brought to that role was very different. Similarly, if you do analytics, then you go and let's say do sales, when you go back to analytics, the perspective you bring on the table will be very different than your peers, and your career trajectory will be very different and it will be very rich. So that the fear of specialization versus generalization, it's a common question. Both have its role, both have its roles. But whenever I'm hiring, I'll look for somebody who's done multiple roles and then coming to me to be hired, because then I can trust that person that they are very adaptable and they can very different situation they can do much better versus somebody who's very, very specialized in one role. I will not trust them with any role. If you've done the same role for 10 years, sorry, but I will not trust you with a new role because you've done the same role. That is unfortunately. So that is the perspective people need to have more and more.
Absolutely. I think it goes without saying, as maybe as a corollary, Ankit, with your permission, something like, each one of us learn our mother tongue because nobody would have taught us mother tongue. But then we add, quite a few of us learn maybe 3-4 languages. Some people learn even 6-7 languages kind of thing. I think that's how you add up, but you never lose track of your mother tongue. I mean, your basic language, that's what it is like. Now, that's an interesting question from Mr. Chitranjan Mohapatra. His question is, hi, sir, as you said, I actually got stuck in banking since last September 2009 and got promotion in the year 2014 and 2020 to higher role, but want to change from pure retail branch banking to Mastercard. Thank you, Chitranjan. I think let's get to hear from Ankit.
Yeah, so look, Mastercard is a huge, huge company, and we have many different things that we do. And I will not get into exactly what we do, but if you have to think of joining a company like Mastercard or any other MNC for that matter, you need to have a bit of a plan. And I think the best way is to do networking. A lot of times the attitude is that, okay, I will apply for this role and somebody will interview me, I'll get that role. But unless you do some networking, you should not, don't expect that you will land a job. It's very competitive out there. One thing I do notice is there are times when, so we have colleagues, for example, in Mastercard in India, right, who work there, and they often want to move outside the country for another role with Mastercard abroad, and they try and I often tell them, go do networking, write to people and ask them for the time and speak to them. So when you reach out to people, you can reach out on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great platform. You can reach out on Twitter, now called X, and people are generally willing to help, and that's what you have to believe. What I've seen is that when you write to somebody senior and you want to talk to them and that person does not respond, you feel, oh, maybe I've upset that person or that person is too busy, and you never follow up. Whereas the mindset of, let's say, when I'm here in the US, if somebody writes to me, the mindset is, if I don't respond, they'll write again next week, and they'll write again next week, and they'll keep writing till I respond. And by the way, most people are willing to help and talk to you. I feel that but they're all busy. Everybody has their own priorities, right? But if you are persistent enough, people will give you time and people will talk to you. And by doing that, they'll open up your thought processes. They will open up doors. They will refer you to the roles, etc. But you have to be persistent. Don't assume that you are their best top priority, because everybody has their priorities. And then you have to kind of somehow get to become their priority by persistence. So networking is the best way. If you have to join something like Mastercard, I'm happy to have a chat with you if you reach out to me and give you advice of what are the kind of roles and understand your background.
Thank you so much, Ankit. Now, the next one, related to this one, in fact, I would say the past two is, but again, let's look at it in different lens. Because we have seen some people, at least each one of us, all of our participants also would have seen, you yourself would have seen, and you would have experienced, right? Now, when you come across somebody who's very aggressively promoting himself or herself to go to the next stage very quickly, right? Very sure. But then the companies actually look at them as that is he or she trying to grow too fast and too less time kind of thing. Now, how do you overcome that as well, Ankit? Because right now, I mean, I've seen a lot of people, right? Maybe they want to hit the deck just about when they're 5 years, 6 years. I think they want to be in the corner suit. Now, maybe they have all the the wherewithal and all that, but the point is that there is a natural progression that the companies have been known for. Maybe like you rightly said, ladder is what it is like. You will take, you have a typical the tenuity at each stage. Not that you have to be fixated, but nevertheless, that's what people say. And therefore, when it comes to appraisal cycles, they say that no, you're not eligible because you have to be at least for 2 years, 3 years. Or each company has its own philosophy about it. So therefore, how do you keep up pace with these people who are very energetic and who are very I would say aggressive, quote unquote, with all due respect, but they nevertheless, if the company is not able to keep up pace with them, and therefore eventually they get frustrated and they might leave. That's one possibility. Other possibility, definitely, like you rightly suggest, that if you can have equivalent of unlock programs in India, right? Because they have something called, is in quite a few companies, Ankit, you would know, they have something called IJPs, right? Internal job posting. They do it, and therefore they encourage people to have the lateral movement within the company in a different division altogether. But again, the point is that very few people apply, because again, the second one, therefore, is that, like you rightly said, you must have that culture or the ecosystem to nurture that kind of movement. Otherwise, again, people might not be welcomed to the new team or things like that. So therefore, how do you expect companies to quote unquote again tolerate such very aggressive people who want to move faster, too quick kind of thing?
Yeah, so it often happens. I think the first thing is you have to be sure that this person is not just aggressive and wanting to get promoted, but there is some substance and content behind it. Right?
Yeah.
There are, for the right or wrong reasons, there are individuals obviously who are very good at self promotion, right? And you see their LinkedIn posts, they'll have their photo. I know executives who have their big photographs of themselves and for whatever small thing that they do, and they'll keep promoting themselves very high. But you really have to understand, from a company perspective, you need to be clear about, is this real talent or is this just talk, right? That is very, very important. And I believe that most companies now have an accelerated program for very talented people, right? And you do have your performance ratings, but you also have a talent rating where you are classified as very high potential talent versus regular standard talent, etc. And for high potential talent, yes, there is possibility to grow you much faster than the regular, but you have to be very sure that this is talent. Now, having said that, even if somebody is even more aggressive to say, oh, I have to get promoted and I do want that role and whatnot, then the company needs to take a call. Is the company's culture more important to them than this individual? Because if you vitiate the culture, if you kind of set a bad example by promoting individuals like this, then everybody else will start to question as to, do we really follow what we say, right? In Mastercard, we have what is called as Mastercard Way. I'm sure most companies have their own cultural things that they talk about, and they have a fine defined culture. It's really up to then the company to say, yes, talented, yes, we've given this individual an accelerated path so far, but if now the demands are so unreasonable, and this person is not willing to prove himself or herself in other roles, because you can just do very well in, let's say, sales role, and you grow, but if you're not willing to take on other roles, then we'll have to part ways, and we'll rather lose that one individual than sacrifice the culture of the company. I think that call some companies take very, very well. For example, Bain was very good at, because for consulting firms like Bain, you always have type A personalities. It's full of type A personalities who are very super smart, very hardworking, and very aggressive. Right? So in companies like that, while there is a track where you can promote it much faster, if you are trying to spoil the culture of the firm, they're very happy to give you an outplacement by encouraging you to take other role outside the company, because culture is very important for that company. They often say, Dr. Chaudhary, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Absolutely. Now, I think we have a question from Vaidya. Vaidya, would you like to ask? Yeah, go ahead, Vaidya, if you want to ask question, please. Or me. Can you hear me, Vaidya?
Hey, this is not Vedya, this is Anushri. So basically, this entire batch is facing issues joining on this call, and Vedya helped me join this call. He forwarded me a link. I used that. So there's basically a problem with the link that is on the LMS portal. It says the link is broken. All of us are facing that problem.
Okay,
I don't know who else is on the call, but the technical rep or the technical numbers are not responding. I'm
sure.
sorry to go off topic, but I just thought before we proceed any further, we just should have our other batchmates on the call.
Sure, but I hope, yeah, no, don't worry, we'll look into that. Vaidya, thank you. Now, there's a question from right Monish, and his question is: Hi, sir. Thank you for your fantastic session. Would like to know how to cherry pick career advancements or offers from inside or outside your firm rationally in a juncture where you are not sure about whether the opportunity will push you up in your career ladder or not. Thank you, Monish. Very interesting.
So, Manish, good question. And I do not have a magic wand, but I'll give you one tip that I always employ when I'm looking for other careers or other roles within or outside the firm. Is I always try and think about not just the next role, but what that role does for me for my role after that. It's very important. So always thinking of 2 degrees of separation from where you are, not just 1 degree. It's never about your next role. It's always about the role after that. So you have to always think about what does this next role do for me in my career journey? Does it open up more avenues for me, or does it close more avenues for me? Right. So that's very important. I mean, there's always you're always told, right? Sometimes you never manage your boss, you manage your boss's boss. I always manage not my boss, I manage my boss's boss. So similarly, you should always be thinking about not just the next role, but the role after that. Then the second thing is, I think one other interesting rule that you can apply, not in all situations, and always be rational about what you do. But if it's a role that scares you, if you think, oh, this is too challenging, I cannot do this, or it's very scary, I think it's the right role. Whether you succeed in that role or you fail in that role, you will become a much more resilient professional, in my view, at the end of it. Because really, the game is not short term. The game is always long term, right? If you are able to do these roles which are very challenging in the short term, which scare you, it will give you so much personal growth that it will accelerate your career beyond anything after that. So these are a couple of things you should always think about as you think about your next role. And by the way, there's one other thing I always tell. I recently tweeted about it as well. If you are in a role that you love, you should think about how do you leave that role very quickly, because you are getting comfortable. If you're loving the role, that means you're too comfortable. You will hit a dead end very quickly. Please move on from there. So
No, I think very interesting perspective. In fact, I mean, I've heard quite a few people say that. In fact, I mean, quite very senior people after having left their great careers, Ankeet, that you should definitely leave when you're doing at the peak of your career, not when you're bottom of career. I mean, that's very important. That's right. But I think I think I just go back maybe 1 or 2 steps backwards. I think one of the words that you used, Ankeet, sometime during your presentation, I mean, your talk, is about what you call the loyalty part of it. Now, having said that, you would have seen different people in your own career, right? Somebody who's, of course, some companies do reward loyalty, especially family businesses. There's no doubt about it, because they need people, that kind of people, because to build that kind of trust, I mean, definitely you need people who must have been homegrown and blah blah blah. That's one way of looking at it. But the point is that I think having worked in consulting firms also. Do you think that there can be cost of loyalty, Ankit, in the sense that, let's say, blunt question is that what is the incentive for someone to innovate if you have been there in the company for, let's say, last 20 years, last 15 years? Because people have somehow more, I think mentally have taken to you. So therefore, even if you make a small incremental change, might be people might think that you've done a great job because you've been there and you have been nurtured and you have been homegrown for so many years. So therefore, what do you think there can be cost to the employee loyalty for the same company, or the group of companies that they're nurturing loyalty?
So cost to the employee, right?
The cost of loyalty to the company.
To the company or to the individual who's being loyal?
Both. Yeah, I mean, both. Definitely both. Yeah.
So for the individual, though, I mean, sometimes, look, I think everything depends on what your North Star is, right? If your North Star is that I want to be comfortable in my role. I don't have aspirations to become CEO at some day, etc., or to become a C-suite. I do not want breadth of experience for me just being in a certain role. And there are people like that, and there's nothing wrong, by the way. I'm not saying that is absolutely wrong. That is, for some people that will work, but it's really how you are wired. If you are comfortable with being in the same company for years, then if it's a company that really rewards loyalty, like sometimes in family run firms, then you should absolutely must stay there, and there is no cost to you. If, however, you think that, oh, I'll have about a 40-year working career, 40 to 45 years, maybe longer, because now life expectancy is growing, then you have to really think about what happens if 10 years of loyalty doesn't pay off and I'm asked to leave, or the company shuts down, and what happens to me? Then you become a bit of untouchable in as far as other companies are concerned, because you've not built the skills. You've just grown, you've been comfortable in your own line in that company. You've not seen other company cultures. You'll have a big transition period. I would say between 3 and 5 years of transition period before you get ready for what we call as the big bad world of open all the other companies. So it will take you time. So there's a cost of doing that. There's a risk. However, if you feel comfortable, then it works for you. That's not a problem. As far as the loyalty cost to the cost of loyalty to the company is concerned, I think they miss out a bit on external talent, fresh thinking. They get bogged down in their own thought process because they are trying to promote people who've been in the company. There's no fresh thinking that is getting infused in the company. So it's not surprising if they become a relic, and they start become fossilized very soon, that there's no fresh thinking injected into the company. That's the risk.
Well said, Ankit. I think I think we get to see that because we have seen. In fact, a lot of case studies also on that. In one we've done. The last question for today evening, or maybe today morning for you, Ankit, is that I think quite a lot of time. Maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure a lot of us, both. Quite a few people go through it. They actually compare. They know there's a point in somebody, or maybe for some people it's longer time. For many people, definitely is there. They actually become restless when they start comparing themselves to a lot of other people. You get to see left hand side, right hand side. My colleagues are doing well. My friends are doing well. All kind of things. So therefore, inherently, I think you start putting so much burden on yourself. About it. Of course, some of it can act as a labeler, some of it can act as a motivation to do it better. But then, let's say every time you're not able to catch up, at their pace, and therefore suddenly it started becoming some burden, both the health-wise, and also because it started becoming some sort of anxiety, and then slowly turning into a lot of other issues, right? So therefore, how do you look at how do you draw a line between when you actually want to be aspirational and when you actually say that, okay, hang on, I think I've done my best, but there's only so much that I can do about it. So how do you draw? So therefore, ultimately, somewhere like you rightly said, you need to start prioritizing your own thing, not just about career, but also family and those kind of other things. So therefore, how do you expect people to draw a line when you think that, yes, I think I have enough of it? I'm not saying that I'm giving up, not at all. It is just maybe it is a little slow for me because for what I am for. But the point is that at some point of time, is it good to recognize that, yes, there is so much that I can do and there is so much that I cannot do, Ankit?
It's an excellent question, Dr. Chaudhary. When I was younger, I have to say I was very, very. It's not like I'm not competitive now, but I'm competitive in different ways. A lot of times, when especially as I was younger in my first 2 or 3 jobs, I used to always look on the sides, compare myself. What are my peers doing? Where am I at? And why am I not growing fast, etc. Right? That used to be my single, and I used to do whatever. Also, given some of the things you taught me, Dr. Chaudhary, I used to always think about, okay, how can I be the first person in office, last one out, etc. All of that I did, and it really gave me a huge amount of growth, and I was doing very, very well. I think the perspective we lose over time sometimes is you have about 45-year working life and maybe more, right? And sometimes I have people in my team who fret over not being promoted in one round, because the next promotion round is 6 months, but they're getting very frustrated with the fact that, oh, I lost 6 months. And I keep reminding them that 6 months is maybe 1% or 2% of your career. It's not a long time. Then you have a long career in front of you. So having that perspective is very important. The second one is you have to always trust the process. Now, not necessarily the process of your firm. You have to trust your firm, yes. If you don't trust the firm, by the way, and you feel that there is no procedural fairness, I don't think you should stick, because you might do well and then that will frustrate you. But if you think the firm is fair, you have to trust your own process, that I am doing the best that I can. And if I'm still not getting it, then you have to do some introspection. You have to get feedback. I mean, I feel that some people are also nervous about getting feedback, open feedback. And you have to find, by the way, the right people to give you feedback. There is a very interesting talk by this gentleman called Adam Grant.
Okay.
And he speaks about disagreeable givers. Disagreeable givers. Unfortunately, we surround ourselves with people who are very agreeable, not very disagreeable. When we look for mentors, we find people who kind of agree to your point of view, who mollycoddle you instead of showing you the mirror the right way. So you have to find disagreeable givers as your mentors. So these are people who will call you out and say, look, this is exactly what you're doing wrong, and this is what I've seen you do. And if you find such people, then you will realize that there are things which you might not be doing right and where you can further improve. And once you do that and you have that introspection, maybe it will help you succeed. But if it is a firm where you feel that even despite everything, there is some there's favoritism and the processes are not fair, then I would say that you should better move on for the sake of your career.
I think, with your permission, I'm just taking not a question, but it's a nice comment from, I think, one of the participants, Rajiv Gupta, and his comment and observation, if I may. So, I appreciate your perspective. I moved myself from travel domain to domain analytics to edutech finance, and having a challenging time. But it gives me courage after listening to you that I will learn new problem-solving methods and will help in the long run. So I think you could baptize one person in the Ankit. But thank you so much, Ankit, from all of us, and it's an absolute pleasure having you, and especially on Saturday morning. But like you said, that's a really dream career. I think I'm sure you should start inspire. I'm sure you would have inspired scores of people in your journey, but I think you will continue to inspire many more people in the rest of your very long and very successful career. But from all of us, from all of our participants, thank you so much to you and your wonderful family. Please say hi to all of them, Shaila and your wonderful son, right? And then and hope to host you in person when you're in India next time, Ankit.
Thank you, Dr. Chaudhary. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone.